Hello friends! I have been playing Ni No Kuni recently and I absolutely love it, apart from the fact that every time I get to a boss monster I have to ask my husband to beat it for me because I am so terrible at games. This game was made for like 5-year-olds and I still struggle. Sad times. Anyway, let's make Mr. Drippy because he's Welsh like me, innit? I have so many issues. Let's take a look at what we'll need for this project. The first thing you'll need are some drippy coloured fabrics, so I've got these pastel yellow and teal colours ready. You'll also need a pencil. This one looks like a twig, that part is optional. You'll need some pale thread and a needle. You'll need 2 large black buttons or something else that you want to use for the eyes. You'll need some glue, just cardboard strength, PVA will do fine. You'll need something to make the lantern flame, and again you can choose whatever you like. I ended up not using the tissue paper, but it is an option. You'll also need some stuffing. You're going to need some cardboard, some scissors, not shown here, and a clear plastic sandwich bag or some other form of clear plastic. Lastly, you will need some paint and a paintbrush. So the first thing we're going to make is the lantern that hangs from the end of Mr. Drippy's nose. To do this you will need to draw out a net for a cuboid. I appreciate this all just got really technical, but it's going to be okay. You can just Google cuboid net like me and you'll be fine. So I started off freehand and quickly decided that using a ruler was a good idea. Remember to add the tabs in the relevant places and it should look something like this when you're done. Then you need to cut it out. And once it's cut out you can fold along the lines where you've drawn. Just make sure that the plain colour of the cardboard is on the outside. Before you glue it together, you can cut some windows out of all the large rectangular panels and one of the square panels. You can use a craft knife if you like, but I managed fine with my scissors. Next, take some more cardboard and draw out another square that's the same size of the square from your last net. We're going to turn this one into a square pyramid for the top of the lantern. This is done by adding a triangle to each side of the square and then adding a tab to one of the sides of each triangle. Again, Google it if you get stuck. Once you've cut that one out, you can once again fold along the lines, fold the tabs inside the shape and glue it all shut. Returning to the body of the lantern, we are going to take a small section cut from the plastic bag and glue it to the inside of the net so that it covers all the 4 windows. Then take another smaller piece for the bottom window and glue that into place too. You can then trim away any excess plastic that is sticking over the edges of the cardboard, and then you can go ahead and glue the net closed apart from the top flap so that you'll have something that looks like this. To create the flames, I'm going to take some of this sparkly embroidery thread and use the yellow and red parts. This thread can be separated into lots of delicate strands that look like fire, and I'm basically going to stuff the lantern full of these to create that fiery effect. Once it's full, it looks like this. I closed and glued down the top flap, and I can now glue on the square pyramid top part of the lantern so that the shape is complete. While the glue was drying, I got on with making Mr. Drippy himself. I found a photo of him as I found a picture of him as a reference, and I chose to make a paper template to start with so that I got the proportions right. I cut out the paper pieces and I drew around them onto the reverse sides of the relevant colour fabrics. I am making a head, a body and 2 little arms. I then sandwiched each part together with another piece of the material and pinned them all in place ready to sew. I'm going to use a back stitch around all the pieces following the line I've drawn and leaving a gap where the neck will be. After I finish sewing, I cut around my stitching, leaving a few millimeters gap from the stitches, and I then turned them all back the right way round. Now I'm going to come back to my lantern, which is all dry, and I'm going to paint it. I was really lazy and I used this shade of acrylic paint straight out of the bottle, but feel free to be fancy and mix up a shade of your liking. After that, I decided to dry brush a little bit of gold paint on the top of the brown to make it look extra shiny and magical. So here is what that looks like when it is complete. I am going to set that aside to dry once again, and back to Mr. Drippy we go. Now with all the pieces ready, we can go ahead and stuff them with some stuffing. Stuffing the arms was a little bit fiddly, so you might need to use something to push the stuffing right down into the bottom of them. And now it's time to start attaching everything together. So to do this, I folded a little seam on the neck part of the head and I pinned this into place onto the body, ready to sew them together. I'm not really sure how this turned out so badly, but I'm pretty sure you can do a much better job of attaching them together than I did. But anyway, they are attached, so I am satisfied. I then repeated the process with the arms, and again I did a terrible job with the sewing. I honestly feel like this is the worst sewing I've ever done in my life, and I can just feel the judging eyes of those who actually know how to sew looking at this video like, what? I do apologise, I am usually better than this. So next I went about attaching the eyes on either side of the head with some black thread. After all this, our lantern should finally be dry, and in order to attach it I'm going to use this loop from an old necklace and some gold thread. So I tied a knot at the end of the thread, stuck my needle through the top of the lantern, and I put a few more stitches through the top of the lantern before threading on my smaller loop and stitching it securely to the top of the lantern, and that ended up looking like this. All that was left to do was to use a little bit more gold thread to attach the larger loop to the tip of Mr. Drippy's nose, and with that, Drippy is finished. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of the little Ni No Kuni creatures turned into plushies, then let me know in the comments. I will see you next time. Bye!